Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, lead editor and writer on Maul Shadowlord, and you're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, the ship in orbit around the outer rim planet of Navarro with lots of treats underneath the Captain Christmas tree for this week's episode. I am Jedi Master John Mills, and I am joined by my dear friend and trusted Jedi Master, Matthew Rushing. Matt, how are you doing, and are you ready to see the next chapter in the fight for Navarro's independence?
Well, John, I would say I'm in a celebratory mood today, and I'm really glad to be back with you. And, of course, couldn't be more excited that, Captain Christmas Tree is back, or, Captain Easter Basket, or whatever you want to call him.
Yes.
But before we dive into the episode, John, we would encourage people to go over to any podcast catcher you're listening on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those type of places. Subscribe, make sure you're following the show so you get our episodes as soon as they come out. You can also, of course, review us and rate us on those places, which we would greatly appreciate because it helps us grow. And, as we're approaching the 50th anniversary of Star Wars next year, maybe you know a Star Wars fan in your life, and they're kind of closet, but they want to listen to a good podcast. Recommend us to them. That would be great. You can also do this on social media. We're over on X, Twitter at the Jedi Masters. We're on Facebook with the entire network at facebook.com/the Nerd Party. You can find us online at thenerdparty.com, and of course, you can also interact with us over on Instagram at Join Nerd Party. But John, I wanted to ask you about this because we talked about this the last time we went back to Navarro in this season, and if it's a crutch. How do you feel about that now that we spend a lot of time on Navarro before we even get to anything with the Mando?
I can honestly tell you that this is an episode, and I know that next week, it's a rewatch, so we already know. I know that next week is going to reinforce this. I think this episode was the most glaring thing to me. It was apparent during the Dr. Pershing episode. It was apparent during some of the Navarro stuff. But this episode very much feels like, we couldn't do Rangers of the New Republic. We got to work this pirate thing in somewhere. We have to give something, this is a state of the New Republic sort of thing. And I got to be honest with you that I thought it was cool, but I also thought it was misplaced. And I know how this might sound, but I don't care about Navarro except how it relates to Mando. And this episode eventually gets to that point, but not clearly enough, not quickly enough. And so that, that's where I am with it is, just coming straight in. I'll just tear the Band-Aid off. And it's like, it gets to the point where Mando's the one that can help him and he gets the covert to help. But, and this is where I'll bounce it back to you, it just feels so jumbled. It feels like the story was there, but it's just told, it almost feels like it's out of sequence. It feels like I should encounter certain things before I encounter other things. And not even a re-edit can really save it. Only a rewrite could have, reassembled this episode to be what it needed to be.
I like what you're saying because I definitely felt that throughout the episode, especially at the beginning of the episode, that it really truly felt almost like a part of a script that they had from Rangers of the New Republic that they needed to help fill in some of the gaps that they had story-wise that they were going to utilize to build the end of this season, right? And that they had hoped that those shows, I'm guessing, would almost have been running concurrently so that you could have played back and forth between them. And I absolutely concede your point because the episode does feel disjointed in the sense that we, again, spend so much time on one story before we actually get back to the Mandalorian and Grogu and connecting it with the Mandalorians. Because I'll be honest, rewatching the episode, I actually felt like that the way in which it finally uses the Mandalorians and it kind of kicks off that whole story for them in the sense of that, you know, as we kind of mentioned the other episode, this show is called The Mandalorian, but this season really is about the Mandalorians in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's about bridging two worlds, right? And we get that. And so I think that's the frustrating part about this, because I actually really enjoyed the episode more on the rewatch here because of the ways in which it was doing those things to which I was really excited about with the Mandalorian lore. But the process of getting there, yes, you're right. I mean, it does feel just kind of discombobulated.
Well, and I think the reason it feels discombobulated is because of the earlier storytelling missteps in the season. I feel like this episode, all of these things could have been edited into something earlier in the season. And if we had not spent the time with the Dr. Pershing stuff, this happens much closer to where it's supposed to, right? This is a very fast resolution for this pirate storyline, but a fast resolution can work if it's told quickly. I know that might not make sense to people, but I have part one, and then I take a breather, and then I have part two. If I have part one and part two right next to each other, even though it's a quickly resolved story angle or story point, it's at least told as quickly as its resolution justifies, sort of thing. This feels more like it's stretching. They knew where this was going. They knew it was going to end. If you're not going to have, the pirates in episodes 1, 2, and 3, then just have them in 1 and 2. Otherwise, I'm waiting too long. And then guess what? If you really want the Dr. Pershing thing, you could actually flip that around and make that in this episode so that it ends very close to the discovery of Moff Gideon's disappearance, which is related to all the stuff they're talking about in episode 2. And it's like, it's almost as if, in all honesty, the reason this works better on rewatch, because it does work better on rewatch, the reason it works better on rewatch is because you can binge a little bit, even if it's not, all at once. This season is constructed for a binge, but was released week to week. Make sense? I think that's what cripples it in a sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's one of those things where if you had just actually if you had set the season up that the way that storytelling was going to go is you were going to have these concurrent running stories that were going to find their way to a point together at some point in the season, right? Like kind of a normal prestige television show might do. I think that would have been more helpful because that's the other way I think that you can alleviate this sense of discontinuity and discombobulation of like the construction of the episodes where it just feels disjointed and like I'm not in the right space of the story that I need to be. It would be like writing a book the way that Tolkien did, but it's not the type of story that works that way, right?
Yeah. Well, actually another show where I think you can see the same sort of story editing issues, and please keep in mind, I don't mean this to be charged because I did not dislike the final season as much as other people did. But a lot of these story editing issues are apparent in the final season of Stranger Things as well, where there's a lot of stuff happening, but sometimes you're sitting there struggling with, how does this relate to the other thing?
Yeah.
And then like at the end, you can sort of be like, yeah, okay, well, that happened. Things are told too far apart from each other in the context of the episodic structure. And that's what creates all of the issues. And that's what's most I would say that so far, this is the most frustrating episode of the season as a result, because there's stuff here I like. There's stuff I was vested in. There's stuff that I wanted to see. And they took too long to get to it. Like it really feels like there are so many pieces here that get broken up by the fact that they want to wedge in this Rangers of the New Republic stuff that they couldn't get to in the series that got canceled. And the thing is, I want to ask you actually with this is, we have this big battle. Did you feel a sense of spectacle with the battle? Did you feel that the effects carried us through the battle on this time? At the very least, did that work? Was there a good enough payoff with that?
I think certain points did, and then there are other points that didn't. So it's a little bit uneven. You know, I think when the ship finally crashes, you know, it feels a little video game-ish in the sense that, you know, it seems to crash behind the town, but so, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a little too clean.
Yeah. But I mean, I felt like the air battle itself was pretty cool. And then the Mandalorians dropping out of the ship and all that. I mean, again, kind of being able to see in live action some of the stuff we've seen in the Clone Wars with that type of ship and Mandos was great. I really liked that. You know, I loved, you know, kind of seeing that the N1 as a starfighter is such a nimble ship in the way, of course, that, you know, it's been souped up and everything. I thought all that was really fun. So those are the things that I really didn't quite have an issue with. And it wasn't as, you know, clean as I would have liked it. And of course, it doesn't look like it would have if this had been a film, but it was good enough for me. That's how I felt about it. It was good enough.
Question. Do you think the episode would have worked better if the pirates got away? They took a butt whooping, but got away instead of crashing and all dying.
I mean, possibly. I think I would have been. I think I would have wanted to have felt that the pirates would never come back, basically, because, you know, now that the Mandalorians are here, they're, you know, this planet is not unprotected. You know, I think that would have been fine if that had happened, because, you know, in some ways you need to feel that this planet is secure, because this is the Mandalorians choosing to make this a new home for themselves, in the sense that this will be a major base of operations now for them, as they do plan to, you know, by the end of the episode, the goal is to retake Mandalore and to bring the factions together. Navarro is actually, the sense I get in this episode is that this will be a major Mandalorian hub, you know, for the rest of, you know, who knows when. Only the Force knows. And so I think that's the thing that it's like I would have needed by the end to know that these pirates would not be coming back. And I think they took the easiest way, which is to, you know, have them just completely all destroyed. And that this is just one of the pirate gangs out there. I think there is a part of my brain that thinks, though, well, this is only one pirate gang, so there could be more.
Sure.
And,
sure.
You know, I don't know. Did you feel that, or do you think the same thing? Or
for some reason, them getting away makes it feel less hurried, less, lack of a better word, less cheap, because it feels like they're just throwaway villains. Now, keep in mind, Tarkin's introduced and dies in one movie originally. Grievous introduced and dies in one movie originally. So Lucas was never enamored of the idea of like having to have the same villain carry through.
I mean, Dooku, barely, he's barely in the third
Dooku
movie.
has what, like 3 minutes of screen time?
Yeah.
Settle down, nerds. I love Dooku. But like, it's one of those things where for some reason there's a part of my brain that's like, if they had made it away and they limp away, it feels like, or even kill, Captain Christmas Tree, and his group goes off and is like, no, I'm running for the hills. Like, for some reason that just works better for me. I just think it makes more sense. I don't know that I can really put it into words, but it feels like having that remaining threat then reinforces the idea of, well, the Mandalorians have even more reason to stay on this planet because they don't like unfinished business. And they're not chasing after them because they want to save themselves for the attack on Mandalore. But, let's be honest, they'll, okay, fine, we'll stay here. And that way, if they show up again, we can finish them off, sort of thing. It's just, but it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. My key question, though, is I was excited by the idea that Bo-Katan had a change of heart, had a conversion story, and it accepted the way. And then all of a sudden now, at the end of this episode, it's like, never mind, you can take your helmet off. And it's like, oh, okay. Do you feel that that's too quick? Do you feel that they should have waited an extra episode for her to take her helmet off?
I think that and this is the thing that makes it really fascinating, and it's one of the reasons I think I would have enjoyed, obviously having a 4th season of The Mandalorian to kind of see how this plays out. But the sense I was getting from this episode about the Armorer doing what she's doing here is to say, hey, we've got to put the petty differences aside.
Oh, for sure.
And come back together as Mandalorians. And the best way to do that is for me not to force you to be like me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, absolutely. I think the question that you're asking, though, about whether or not it needed to happen in this episode or if it maybe should have waited, you're kind of constrained in the sense that this is already episode 5 of the season. And if you're trying to get to where you're going to get by the end of this season, then you don't have a lot of time for that. And I thought, to me, it didn't feel too rushed because of the conversation that they end up having. And the key to that being is that the Armorer says, you saw a mythosaur. And so that being the linchpin for this decision of the Armorer to make her turn. And I think that's actually what's more interesting here is that it's not Bo that really needs to have the turn, it's the Armorer. Sure. And so that to me is where I didn't feel like this felt too quick, because it actually felt like they had developed enough of the story for this moment to happen when it does, and I don't feel cheated per se. Fair.
I'm willing to listen to it. Like on the rewatch, for some reason, I had less of a problem with it. I remember in the moment, I was like, wait, I totally got the reasoning. I actually loved the reasoning. I thought it was great. It was well written. But I was like, oh, well, we just made a big thing. What?
You can't hide Katie's face forever, John.
Well, that would be a crime. I would actually be very upset if they did. But it's one of those things where it's like, but the thing is, I think that's actually sort of the thing too. This show is a victim to the idea that we're going to tell it in 8. 8's how many we're going to tell it in. 8 means it's done. And if you look at it, it's the reason why Maul Shadow Lord, which is amazing, everybody presumed it was going to be 8 episodes when it came out. And there, I don't know if you remember, but like in the beginning, there was like almost this thing where like they were continually saying like, no, it's 10 episodes, guys. Like early on, there was messaging going out there. It was like, it's not 8, it's 10. At its core, should The Mandalorian, given everything that it had to readjust itself to, have taken season 3 and said, screw it, we're doing 10 or 11 episodes? Do you think that solves the whole problem?
Yeah, because then you could have had those episodes in, the Book of Boba Fett be a part of this, and you didn't feel like you had to add that there. There
you go.
Although, anyway, all of this would have taken a lot of rewriting. I think what this does kind of go to show is that you can truly feel like that there is a story place that they're still trying to get us without a whole extra show. And, they could say whatever they want, I think, to us, and we'd still be like, yeah, you guys had a plan that involved having, the Book of Boba Fett, Mando, Knights of, the
Rangers
of the New Republic, an Ahsoka show. You had all this kind of like building, and when you take a whole 8 episodes away, it creates a conundrum for you. And because it is very clear, this episode does really want to deal with the sluggishness and the almost irresponsibility of the New Republic and the way it's being run. And so I kind of wanted to ask you about that. And because we really kind of get a picture of a completely incompetent New Republic government right now.
But this is where we enter the tricky question. The Mandalorian became a cultural phenom because of Baby Yoda, and that you didn't need to know jack about the deep lore of Star Wars. Didn't need to know a thing about it. Even in episode 2, when Ahsoka shows up, it's just enough of Ahsoka for a cash, like my wife, to get what's going on. Oh, this is a Jedi. Oh, she was Anakin's. Hey, wait, Anakin had a student? Yeah. There's a whole thing, Clone Wars. If you want to watch it, I can tell you. Or the short version is, yeah, she left the Order, and now she's back. But, and my wife was able to plug in and go with it. Ahsoka's a Jedi that she encounters. Who's Grand Admiral Thrawn? Oh, that's intriguing. Maybe I'll come back to that later. This is so steeped in world building. The thing I struggle with is I look at it through that lens of they're getting into that nitty gritty of it, where it's like they've suddenly taken the Mandalorian show, which is very much very accessible to the casual fan, and turned it into something where you really have to sort of like slow down and be like, okay, well, yeah, no, remember the New Republic's the rebellion. They took over already, because there hasn't been enough story laid about the New Republic to this point.
I mean, yeah, if the sequels had been better, this wouldn't have been a problem. But I will say again, this is where a whole show devoted to these ideas, you don't have to feel like you have to try and shoehorn in into the Mandalorian these ideas, because it would have already been set up in another show that somebody could have watched, and given them the context. And I think it could have done it in a way that did kind of make it more accessible, because it has, again, 8 episodes to bring people into the world, right? And with a character that you were already familiar with from The Mandalorian, right? And characters, right? I mean, I think you would have had Carson Teva, who you had seen in, you would have seen somebody like we see in this episode, Zeb, right? Of being a part of that world, most likely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I do have to say that there is a part of me that is really, really frustrated by everything you're talking about, because what they wanted was they wanted to have their cake and eat it too, to borrow an old phrase. And in a logical sense, what should have happened is full brakes on production. If you're going to cancel a show, you have to say, okay, you know what? I'm not just going to rewrite and try to bring these things in. I got to stop for an extra 6 months. If I'm willing to stop Rise of Skywalker for an extra however many months because J.J. Abrams is trying to tweak the story, or I'm willing to stop Force Awakens for 6 months because they're trying to fix a thing, then you can wait another 6 months to set things right this way, or figure out, okay, how do we make a different show? We've still got the volume rented. We've still got the story ideas. We can go through with that. But dealing with this show in specific, I mean, again, there's so much that's good. But what I want to fixate on in this moment is Carson Teva encountering the wrecked shuttle. I contend it really should have happened in an earlier episode. Which episode would you have put it on if it was not here as part of Chapter 21, The Pirate?
Possibly an interesting stinger to the previous episode, The Foundling.
Would have worked there.
And then it would have also led into him when he goes to Coruscant in this episode, him saying, hey, I found this shuttle. It looks like, Moff Gideon escaped, and we've got this pirate thing. And so it kind of makes his case a little bit stronger. And yet then, at the same time, it makes the New Republic shuffling its feet even worse. I could see that being the case. What about you?
I would have put it as a scene at the end of the very first episode, because everybody knows Moff Gideon. Everybody loves Moff Gideon. He's the big bad. He's trying to hurt our little baby Yoda. You have Bo-Katan sitting in her throne at the end of The Apostate. We've talked about how certain things should have been shuffled. But how much stronger is that episode if he leaves her on her, her moon or whatever, that she's sitting there sulking, fade out, fade back in, you find out Moff Gideon is missing. That tees up so much intrigue later. That even actually would redeem having the convert episode happen. Because we're like, oh, right, Moff Gideon, he got his shuttle's missing. This is wrong to have it at the end of this episode. I would have had it as part of the first episode, because Moff Gideon is the villain we've been following this whole time.
I think that's really strong. And I think you're right in the sense that that makes the intrigue then with, Katie O'Brien's character, with Dr. Pershing much more interesting, because, you're constantly questioning more in that episode. Is she good? Is she bad? All that kind of stuff. And so when we get to the end of that episode, you're like, oh, so she's a plant. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. I think you're right in the sense that, and this is one of those things where, again, approaching this season slightly more like a prestige television show where storylines are kind of being interwoven together would have helped it extremely. Like, it just would have been a better season if you had done that. And that's the problem, I think, is we're discussing in this episode, and all of these episodes have continued in this season, is that there's not anything wrong with what you're trying to do story-wise. It's the editing of the stories together that has caused the conundrum. And so what you just needed to do is you needed to go back and rewrite the season to better flow all of these storylines together. So you just basically needed, one of those big foam boards that George used to have with the story elements, and you'd be like, okay, if we move this here, this helps this better. It's like you just need to be able to see it. This is all the story. So let's organize this in a way that helps the flow of the season. And it's clear that they hadn't done that, because you're right. I mean, again, the stuff that we get to in this episode that is so good, which is the stuff about the Mandalorians, which is the most interesting part of the series in general, which is Mando, Grogu, and now his connection with the larger Mandalorian culture, which we as Star Wars fans are very excited to be exploring, especially after all the stuff that we saw in the Clone Wars and Rebels. Man, we're primed for that type of thing. And so it's just a disappointment that this season couldn't find a way. And let me put it this way, that this season didn't find a way in its storytelling to accentuate its positives instead of the negatives that we've had to talk about in too many of these episodes.
So where do you land on the vaunted 5-star scale?
I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. And that is because, like you said in the rewatch, I think that the story elements that I really do like came to the forefront more so. And I cared less about, Captain Easter Basket being there, which really bothered me the first time because he's just such a terrible design. Otherwise, it's the other stuff that now that I know that's there can ameliorate that, can make that lessened. And yeah, I mean, by the end of the episode, I'm so with it, and yeah, it just means that you could have had a home run, but you didn't. You got maybe a double. So what about you?
I'm gonna end up the same way, 3.5. There's plenty to enjoy about this episode, and what we're nitpicking about is the fact that this is a 5-star episode that gets hampered by what they did to the rest of the season. That's it. So it winds up at a 3.5. So this 5-star episode pays for the sins of everything else. And that's a shame. It's a darn shame. So,
couldn't agree more.
If people want to yell at you about everything with our review, with our nitpicking, with our story editing, criticisms and stuff like that, where can they find you online?
Well, of course, I love being yelled at. Who doesn't? You can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. Of course, here on the network, I've got a completed show called Owl Post about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series. You can also find me on the TFM network. Got a bunch of shows. One is called the 602 Club. John's a frequent guest over there where we're talking about all of the franchises we love. In fact, we may have a fun crossover coming up. Plus, we'll also be doing a Mandalorian episode. So that's right, folks. Don't worry. You're gonna get your Mando fix, but we're gonna throw in some bonus for you because how can we not talk about? Well, I don't want to give it away. Anyway, John, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me online as Kessel Junkie. The social networks of choice that I enjoy most are Letterboxd and Goodreads, because very few people get angry at me, although some people do get angry at me on Goodreads every so often because there is nothing I won't read, and I read some really weird stuff. So as Kevin Spacey, as Lex Luthor says in Superman Returns, bring it on. And you can, of course, find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where it is my weekly therapy session of enduring their movie opinions about different things having to do with the works of directors and informing them why they should agree with me. So, but I'm called to do it, and I do it gladly. So, Master Rushing, with that said, I actually have planned a very special movie festival in the Jedi Temple, wherein we are going to be showing all of the James Bond movies, but in 20-minute segments and out of order. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
Well, I guess negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.